Not one of these reporters had the real story. Not about Antonia, and not about her murder. Only he did. He was the only person in L.A. who knew what had happened, where it was going, and it felt pretty good to be in the know. "Hey, how you doing?" he heard. The storyteller froze, then turned slowly to see who was talking to him. He recognized the guy's face, but not exactly who the hell it was. Where do I know this jerk from? "Geez, it was just passing by. Heard what happened on the radio, so I stopped to pay my respects, or whatever this is. What a shame. Some tragedy, huh? This crazy world out here. You just never know," said the storyteller, realizing he was babbling a little bit. The other guy said, "No, you never do. Who the hell would want to kill Antonia Schiffman? What kind of maniac? What kind of complete lunatic?" "Out here in L.A., said the storyteller, "it could be anybody, right?"
Chapter 11. 15 minutes after the call from D.C., a black Grand Marquis was waiting for me outside the Disneyland Hotel. I shook my head in disappointment, but also in anger. This sucked in a way that broke new territory. The FBI agent standing next to the car wore a pair of neatly pressed khakis and a pale blue polo shirt. He looked ready for a round of golf at the Los Angeles Country Club. His handshake was vigorous and a little too eager. "Special Agent Carl Page. I'm really glad to meet you, Dr. Cross. I've read your book," he said, "a couple of times." He couldn't have been long out of the academy at Quantico from the look of him. The California tan and nearly white blonde flat top suggested that he was a local boy, probably in his mid-20s. An eager beaver, for sure. "Thank you," I said. "Exactly where are we headed, Agent Page?" Page shut his mouth abruptly and nodded his head. Maybe he was embarrassed that he hadn't thought to answer my question before I asked it. Then he started up again. "Yes, of course. We're headed to Beverly Hills, Dr. Cross. The scene of the homicide, where the victim lived." "Antonia Schiffman," I said, with a sigh of regret. "That's right. Oh, have you already been briefed?" "Actually, no. Not very well, anyway. How about you tell me what you know on the way over to the house? I want to hear everything." He turned toward the car as if to open the door for me, thought better of it, and got in on the driver's side. I climbed in the back, and once we were on our way, Page loosened up a little as he told me about the case. "They're coding this one Mary Smith. That's because there was an email from a so-called Mary Smith sent to an entertainment editor at the L.A. Times last week, taking responsibility for the first homicide." I think my eyes might have crossed. "Wait. This case has been coded already?" "Yes, sir." "So this isn't an isolated incident?" I could hear the tension in my own voice. Had Burns withheld that information from me, or hadn't he known himself? "No. This is at least the second murder, Dr. Cross. Too early to classify it as anything, but there's an indication of solo activity, an organized approach, possibly psychosis. And maybe some level of ritual by the same person at each of the two murder sites. We also believe the killer is a woman, which makes this very unusual." So Page did know a thing or two. Meanwhile, I couldn't help feeling duped by Burns. Why couldn't he have just told me the truth? We were scarcely off of the Disneyland property, and already this murder case was a whole lot more complicated than he'd made it seem. "Son of a bitch," I said between gritted teeth. I was getting tired of being played, and maybe tired of the Bureau, too. But maybe I was just in a bad mood because I'd been pulled away from my vacation. Page stiffened. "Is there a problem?" It would have been easy to blow off a little steam with him, but I wasn't ready to start bonding with Agent Page yet. The whole idea was to float through this case as unattached as possible. "No big problem. Nothing to do with you, anyway. Let's get over to the murder scene. I'm only supposed to take a quick look." "Yes, sir." I caught Paige's blue eyes in the rear-view mirror. "You don't have to call me sir. I'm not your dad," I said. Then I grinned, just in case he couldn't tell it was a joke. Chapter 12. Here we go again. The president has asked for our help. I want to hear your take on what happened. My take? That was a laugh. My take was that I was being used, and I didn't like it. Also, I hated it when I whined like this. We took the Santa Ana freeway into downtown Los Angeles, and then the Hollywood freeway back out again. Agent Paige drove with a kind of automatic aggressiveness, passing cars closely and frequently. One cell phone-using businessman took his other hand off the wheel long enough to give us the finger. Paige seemed oblivious to all of this as he sped northward and told me what else he knew about the grisly double murder. Both Antonia Schiffman and her driver, Bruno Capoletti, had been shot somewhere between 4 and 5:30 in the morning. A gardener had discovered the bodies around 7:15. Schiffman's beautiful face had also been slashed with a sharp blade of some kind. Apparently no money or other valuables had been taken. Bruno Capoletti was found with almost $200 in his pocket, and Schiffman's handbag was still in the limo next to her body. It held credit cards, diamond earrings, and more cash. "Any prior connection between the two of them?" I asked. "Schiffman and the limo driver? What do we know about the two of them?" "The only other movie of hers Capoletti worked on was Banner Season, but he drove for Jeff Bridges on that one. We're still checking the driver out, though. You ever see Banner Season?" "No, I didn't. How hot is the crime scene? Our people, LAPD, the media? Anything else I should know before we arrive?" "I haven't actually been there yet," Paige admitted. "But it's probably going to be off the charts. I mean, it's Antonia Schiffman, you know. She was a really good actress, supposed to be a nice lady." "Yes, she was. It's a shame. She had kids, too. 4 little girls, Andy, Elizabeth, Tia, and Petra," said Paige, who clearly liked to show off. Minutes later, we were off the highway and driving west on Sunset. I watched as the cityscape changed from the cliché-defying urban grittiness of downtown Hollywood to the lush green and cliché residential avenues of Beverly Hills. Rows of palm trees looked at us from above as if down their noses. We turned off Sunset and drove up Miller Place, a winding canyon drive with stunning views of the city behind us. Finally, Paige parked on a side street. Television and radio vans were everywhere. Their satellite towers extended into the air like huge sculptures. As we got closer, I spotted CNN, KTLA, KYSR, Star 98.7, Entertainment Tonight. Some of the reporters stood facing cameras with their backs to the estate, presumably reporting live on the LA and network shows. What a circus. So why do I have to be here too? I'm supposed to be at Disneyland, a kinder, gentler circus. None of the media people recognized me, a refreshing change from D.C. Agent Paige and I politely made our way through the crowd to where 2 uniformed police officers stood guard. They looked carefully at our creds. "This is Dr. Alex Cross," said Paige. "So?" said the uniform. I didn't say a word. "So?" seemed like an appropriate response to me. The uniform finally let us pass, but not before I noticed something that made me a little sick to my stomach. James Truscott, with his cascading red hair, was standing there in the crowd of reporters. So was his camera person, the same woman, dressed all in black. Truscott saw me too, and nodded my way. A smile may have even crossed his lips. He was taking notes. She was taking photographs. Of me. Chapter 13. I was cursing softly as Paige and I followed a long, circular, white-pebbled driveway up to the main house. Mansion was definitely a better word for this place. A two-story Spanish-style construction. Dense foliage on all sides blocked my view past the facade, but the main house had to be at least 20,000 square feet, probably even more. Who needed this much space to live? Our house in D.C. was under 3,000, and that was plenty of room for us. A series of balconies rimmed the second floor. Some of them looked down onto the driveway, where a black limo was cordoned off with yellow crime scene tape. This was where Antonia Schiffman and Bruno Capoletti had died. The area around the limo was blocked off in a wide circle with only one way in and out. 2 more LAPD officers took names as people came and went. Techs in white bunny suits were going over the car with a handheld USB microscope and evidence vacuums. A few others were snapping Polaroids as well as regular photographs. Another whole squad was already fanned out, taking exemplars from the surrounding area. It was all fairly impressive, as well as depressing. The best forensic police department in the world is supposed to be Tokyo's. Domestically, though, Los Angeles and New York were the only departments that could rival the FBI's resources. "We're in luck, I guess," Paige said. "Looks like the ME's just finishing up." He pointed toward the medical examiner, a heavy-set, gray-haired woman standing next to the limo and speaking into a handheld recorder. That meant the bodies hadn't been removed. I was surprised, but it was good news for me. The less disturbed the crime scene, the more information I could get for Burns, and the president, and his wife. I supposed that was why the bodies hadn't been moved. The dead were waiting on me. I turned back to Paige. "Tell whoever's in charge from the LAPD not to move anything yet. I want to get a clean look. And try to clear some of these people out of here. Necessary personnel only. Fibers, printing, but that's it. Everyone else is on break." For the first time that morning, Paige paused before he responded. This was an all-business side of me he hadn't seen. Not that I'm big on throwing my weight around, but right now I had to use it. There was no way I could do a proper job in the middle of all this chaos and confusion. "Oh, and one other thing you should tell whoever's in charge," I said. Paige turned back. "Yeah?" "Tell them as long as I'm here, I'm in charge." Chapter 14. I could still hear Director Burns's voice in my head. "I want to hear your take on what happened. We'll have you back with your family for dinner." But would I want to eat after this? With 2 dead bodies still inside, the limousine was absolutely fetid. One of the best tricks I'd learned was to gut it out for about 3 minutes, until the olfactory nerves were numb. Then I'd be fine. I just had to get through those 3 minutes that told me I was back in the homicide business. I focused and took in the grisly details one by one. First came a shocker that I wasn't ready for, even though I partly knew it was coming. Antonia Schiffman's face was almost completely unrecognizable. A portion of the left side was gone altogether where she had been shot, probably at close range. What flesh remained, mostly the right eye, cheek, and her mouth, had been slashed several times. The killer, Mary Smith, had been in a frenzy, but only against Antonia Schiffman, not the driver, or so it seemed. The actress's clothing appeared to be intact. No indication of any kind of sexual assault, and no sign of blood froth from the nostrils or mouth, which meant she died and stopped breathing almost immediately. Who would make this kind of violent attack? Why Antonia Schiffman? She'd seemed like a nice person, got good press, and everybody liked her, according to, well, everybody. So what could explain this massacre, this desecration at her home? Agent Page appeared and leaned in over my shoulder. "What do you think the cutting is about? Some kind of reference to plastic surgery, maybe?" The young agent had shaken off every subtle and